Hi, everyone. This is Lindsay. We're going to get started in just a minute. Just as a reminder, um, questions can be sent via the chat or Q&A feature if you're on the WebEx. If you're listening just in phone only, go ahead and send me an email, and we'll address your questions throughout the presentation. Thanks. Okay, in the interest of time, I think we can get started. So one more reminder, the chat and Q&A feature on WebEx is how you can submit your questions, or via email to me. This is Lindsay, and the lines will be muted until the end of the presentation, and we'll offer a chance for audio questions. Until then, Keith, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks, Lindsay, and welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me this Thursday afternoon. I'll apologize in advance. I have a little bit of a snuffles from a cold or allergy, so I'll try to speak clearly and take a drink every now and again, so I apologize in advance for being a little muffled. Today we want to talk about state of the practice. We've gone through a number of these, and now we're going to do portfolio management, which is my area. As probably most of you know, we had to do a little bit of a restart last year. So there was a period where the practice was fairly quiet. I was working on site pretty much full time, and still am. I'm carving out some time, and really want to take this opportunity to talk about how we want to restart the practice for 2015, and then move it into 2016. So many of you know, but certainly from a historical standpoint, this practice area has been very, very strong in areas like business case analysis, OMB 300s, that kind of work. Working with Robert Kirsch's group, very strong in implementing tools for what's sometimes called project and portfolio management, as well as broader PMO support. So particularly a PMO that's responsible for a number of projects and programs that aren't necessarily tied together. So you look at the work we're doing at DLA, it's really PMO support, and a lot of the work we're doing there is to support the family of programs for that program executive officer. And so we have been and continue to do what we would call portfolio management there. The restart is really about keeping all of those core legacy strengths, if you will, but really adding more analysis. And the thinking behind that, and we'll talk about it as we go through the day here, the thinking behind that is that the OMB 300s and even some of the tools, and certainly some of the PMO support is, if you're in the federal side, has gone to what we might call low price, technically acceptable support. Rightly or wrongly, it gets competed often with a small business set aside at very competitive rates, and that's a place where you can still make money but not make a name for yourself. So we want to, frankly, do both. We certainly want to make money, and there's a lot of money and work out there around those activities, and we'll talk about that when we get to the end for sales support. But to make a name for yourself and to drive that kind of work, the thinking is that we need to leverage more analytical capabilities across the firm, and then that's going to lead us into talking about how we integrate with enterprise architecture and some of the great work at Performance Institute. So maybe enough of that preamble, and I'll move on. Same format as you've seen. If you've been to the other practice area report outs, same process. Excuse me. I may have been a little bit pessimistic in this assessment, but it was an eye on the 2B state with a lot more emphasis on that analytical analysis versus what we are currently doing, and doing quite well. But so some of this yellow is aimed at where we want to be as opposed to where we are. And we'll go through each one in its time. So if we look at at a glance, and I've been quoting Yogi Berra because I think it's apt for portfolio management, and really what we're trying to do with portfolio management. And one of the sayings that's ascribed to Yogi is, it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. And while that's true, I think that's exactly why we have developed something called portfolio management, because it is hard to make predictions about the future, but it's even harder if you don't have a baseline. And so the baseline is very much what portfolio management is all about. It's that baseline, that understanding of where we are today, allows the organizations to be nimble in their reaction to changes in the future, so that you can answer questions like, how does a shifting strategy and operational environments affect how we allocate those resources? How can we mitigate any uncertainties as we change administrations? How do we plan for budget cuts or sequestration or any changes? Maybe they're plus-ups to our budget. How do we rationally leverage those into our overall plan so that we're still meeting the objectives of our corporate or enterprise strategy? So those are the kind of questions in really the mission of portfolio management. In order to do that, obviously you need a business case. We get a lot of work building strong business cases. That's the beginning of the end, not the end of the beginning, as they say. So we want to take that core work that we have traditionally been doing and really begin to apply that to a much higher level in the organization. And later on, we'll use some examples coming out of our current engagements. As we indicated, we actually have quite a strong talent base for portfolio management, particularly around the service offerings that we've identified. So I'm going to go ahead and switch on to the next slide. About a quarter of the firm has identified themselves as being having a high level of expertise in portfolio management. That's a pretty good number. That's 45 people. We don't need to add a lot to that number over the next 18 months, we don't think. We think if we grew that by about 10%, that would be about right. We probably need to shift some of the people a little bit further from 6, 7, 8 to a 9, 10, and maybe redistribute among the service offerings and put more emphasis on things like portfolio strategy, put more emphasis on things like portfolio strategy and analysis and development, maybe a little bit less on OMB CP 300 processes. So that's the thinking and direction that we're going. But we feel actually pretty good about the expertise. We have a good platform to build off of, and we just need to continue that and add a little bit more rigor around the analytical capabilities. There's some definitions in here. Really just because sometimes people ask what's the difference between portfolio and program management. Portfolio management is really about how organizations make and execute decisions. So it's very much governance, and increasingly it's about communicating those objectives throughout the organization. And program management is really about doing things right. So if you've watched the RG portfolio management space for a while, you know the tagline has been for a long time, portfolio management is about doing the right things. That is, we put investments in the right places and in the right amount. So it's about doing the right things as opposed to only doing things right. And we think of project and program management about doing things right. So that is once a program program manager is assigned and he's given a charter and told, this is your objective and this is your budget. Then it's about him being creative, but doing things right in order to achieve that mission. It's not his decision whether he goes out and does it or not. That's a portfolio management decision. That's a government decision. If we look at our core skills, and a lot of these we can tie to the OMB 300. That, as many of you know, is being downplayed by OMB from a compliance, but it still provides a very good guide for what programs should be doing and the data that they provide to the enterprise to help them make portfolio decisions. So the sections, and this is, they change them every year, so this is about 2 years old, really. But project management, so what do we look at in that section? We look at life cycle cost estimation, independent government cost estimates, maybe some should cost analysis. So we have a very strong group led by Tony over at Customs and Border Protection. Historically, I know that Dayton has done a lot of good work on cost around discharges to the programs. So that all rolls into supporting a portfolio management capability. We do a lot of work around earned value management. In the OMB 300, we call that performance-based management. So that again is a skill set that we need in portfolio management. Acquisition strategy, cybersecurity. We go all the way through the list. And increasingly, I think we're seeing enterprise architecture, and I would say risk management as well, but particularly enterprise architecture as being a key capability that organizations need. I'll step aside for a minute. At the DLA, they hosted this past Monday a workshop with all the CEOs from all the services. So my apologies to the commercial and the civil guys. I'll explain that a little bit. Program executive officer is essentially the senior person in the organization responsible for acquiring products and services. In this case, it's all the IT, that is applications. So think ERP, SAP, Oracle, all the big applications that do finance, accounting, logistics, personnel. All those systems are acquired through a PEO shop. So all those folks from the Army, Navy, Air Force, DLA, DISA met at DLA this past Monday, and one of their key themes in that day-long discussion was about how to rationalize all the applications across the enterprise. Meaning, how do I shrink all the applications, many of them with duplicate capabilities that cost a lot of money to maintain? How do I shrink that from a very large number to a much more manageable number? And certainly enterprise architecture plays a huge role in the ability to do that, and that's exactly why it's in the OMB 300 from the get-go. So I think the core skills that we have across all the practice areas are very much supportive of what we try to do with portfolio management from an analytical standpoint. I'm going to take a pause, Lindsay, and take a drink of water in case there's a question.
I haven't had any questions come in just yet.
Okay. Well, I drank my water and I can continue. So thanks. Sorry, everybody. If I look at I'm going to go into a little bit of several slides on competitive analysis and trends. So if I take a hard look in the mirror, what do I see? I see Rama's joy, and particularly around project and portfolio management. We have a tremendous name recognition across the federal government. We are on the Gartner radar, meaning that we're cited in surveys. They come to us and ask us questions. So we are known within Gartner, and that gets back out. We are known to Jim Johnson at the Standish Group. In fact, he called me the other day and was looking at an opportunity he wants us to help with his chaos group. So we have ties with the chaos group, which is Jim Yu and others have cited chaos reports as to why people should move to Agile. I think we enjoy some very good intellectual property. some of that is in a segment that undervalues real program and portfolio management. So traditional places where we've been practicing for a long time have come to expect that. I think there are some markets, frankly, that are underserved by a rigorous portfolio and program management, and those are areas that we want to start to take a harder look at. Weaknesses, John Strecker might disagree, but I think we have not nearly as strong a brand in the commercial as we do in government, so that's something we have to work on. And what I'm going to talk about really the rest of the time is I think we lack a truly distinguishing set of intellectual property. 10 years ago, our strong work around business cases and OMB 300s was more than adequate to drive a large, very large base of business. Today, that's, as I say, become a bit commoditized and needs to be revamped. Excuse me. So the mitigation for that really is, at least my plan with Chris over the next 6 to 12 months, is to rebuild that IP, and again, based on a much more analytical rigor than we have today. If I look at some of our, who I'm really thinking of as competitors, I think of Deloitte, PwC, Pricewaterhouse, Booz Allen, and there's a lot of niche players, and one of the better niche players out there probably is UMT. UMT, for folks, they are the people that initially developed what Microsoft bought to add to their portfolio management tool, and has now been integrated into Project Server. UMT Services is the services arm, and they kept that separate, and they now provide services around portfolio management. Small company, mostly on the commercial side, but there's lots of companies like that do some good work. Pardon me. Some of the, and we've made that yellow because there is strong competition out there, both at the small business going after the 300 business case work, as well as the large companies that are doing truly enterprise portfolio management work. I've made the market trends green. The thinking there is that there's every reason to be encouraged by the size and the robustness of the market. So if we evaluate what companies and organizations are doing in terms of what software they use, there's a lot that are using no software at all. I think that's almost half. So there's a lot of room there to help. We look at who is responsible for portfolio management. This is where it starts to get interesting. Right now it's still within a PMO by about a third of the companies, organizations. Some is in the owning unit. I think the most advanced that we see start to put it with a, particularly in commercial, in a CFO or a risk manager function, because those are people that truly do have an eye towards the performance of the organization, as opposed to just within IT. And it's encouraging that IT, from a global standpoint, IT actually takes up a pretty small share of the where portfolio management falls. So these all indicate that it looks to us like it's a robust and growing marketplace. These are all slides from a recent PwC survey on portfolio program management. It was actually run out of the UK. I changed the name. If you look it up, it's actually spelled program with 2 M's and an E. I changed the name a little bit. We look at what PMI has done. They have a thing called the Pulse of the Profession, and some of their stats look like this. So why do they practice portfolio management? They try to get, why? So the real, so why are we doing? Why spend time worrying about portfolio management? Increased customer satisfaction has routinely come out at the top. So it's not just about reducing costs and being more efficient and effective. It's about serving customers better. And then we get into cost reduction and revenue growth, which is typically coming around tied, improve ROI. So you can read down through there and see why. But it's interesting that consistently, at least in the PMI survey, this idea that focusing our resources on what's important drives customer satisfaction. Kind of over on the right, how's the practice evolved? I think it kind of started with, at least on the federal side, with the Clinger-Cohen Act. OMB picked it up and really pushed hard on it the 300s, early 2000 time frame. A little bit later on, the General Accountability Office developed their IT investment management maturity model and started auditing at least federal organizations against that model. Sometime later, OMB established a portfolio stat and started helping, in air quotes there, helping organizations improve their portfolio and program management capabilities. And not too long ago, PMI issued a standard for portfolio management. Of course, since then, we've had sequestration on the federal side, any number of issues around trying to identify redundancy and save money. So, it continues to evolve, but I believe that we're probably on the upswing of the Gartner hype cycle. So if you've seen the Gartner hype cycle, you initially get this real bump early on because everybody hypes it up, and then there's a fall off because it didn't magically produce all the results. And then over time, you start to see an increase in acceptance or adoption of the ideas that were being pushed out there. So I think we saw this with portfolio management, quite frankly, that there was a hype in the early 2000s with the business cases and OMB pushing, and then it kind of fell off because it didn't deliver everything that it said it was going to. But now it's starting to pick back up, and people are picking the best practices and applying them. And I think I have one more. This says which firms or which types of industries are doing have adopted portfolio management. Defense is on there, I think, at about 100%. Look for it again, but yeah, 100%. So that means they're doing some of it. I'm not sure that defense is doing as good a job at reallocating resources as I think they could. So one of the I'm at Defense Logistics Agency now. So if I look at that organization, they have a view, like many, that once a budget is approved, once a multi-year budget is approved, why do I have to keep coming back and asking for permission to continue? One of the tenets of portfolio management is that I come back and seek permission to continue with that project program to ensure that it's still in alignment with the strategy and the objectives of the organization. Over a few years, particularly in the technology area, it's easy to see that a project that was deemed very important and worthwhile 18 months ago may not be quite as important now as it was 18 months ago. So maybe we should slow that project down a little bit and divert some resources to higher priorities. On the other hand, maybe some projects are doing so well that they should be given more money to accelerate their pace. So that's really, when we talk about the analytical capability, it's really that. So I think of portfolio management as a set of controls or a dashboard, and I'm driving a car. It's very much which of those programs do I want to step on the gas and which ones do I want to apply the brake towards, because, quite frankly, they don't fit as well with the strategy as they did when they were kicked off. And that's the whole point of the governance activity. And some organizations are doing that quite a bit, and others have adopted that a little bit less. So for Mr. Strohacker, we see the insurance groups think that this is fairly important. On the other hand, banking and capital markets, they come in at 70%, something like that. So they're not fully bought into this. So there are some differences depending on which industry you're in. Certainly, a construction, you can see where maybe they don't value portfolio management quite as much as an insurance or an entertainment environment. And again, this is another view of what's important and why we do portfolio management. These next two slides come out of some marketing material that's up on the Knowledge Center Synergy for portfolio management. So what we do to start engaging in conversations, or can an organization answer questions like, How easily do we realign investments in response to changing external and internal conditions? Are we confident that our stated delivery dates and our costs? So these are the kinds of questions, and if we get a I'm not so sure kind of response, then this is how we start to talk to portfolio management as a means to solve these organizational problems, as opposed to a fancy term that's out there that means I have to do a business case and check that box once a year and then not worry about it anymore. I'm going to take another drink of water, sorry. So the next area is tools. This is one where we share actually quite a bit with Robert Kearse and his group. Traditionally, we've done a lot of work with Project Server, obviously. We've done work at Honda, both on the program and portfolio management side. Robert talked, I think it was last week, it was Tuesday, about work at Picatinny. So all those are shared in some ways engagements that leverage Portfolio Server, Project Server. Other areas, so at Novartis, they were a CA shop, so that we have experience with other tools. DLA is going through a process now to look at whether they want to switch out their Primavera ProSite implementation with another tool that combines strong enterprise architecture. So the RG team out there is working through those types of requirements with our DLA customers. So we're engaged in these kind of discussions. And it is very much about, where does the data come from? Is it authoritative data? Is it reliable data? Do the analytics, create dashboards, so that it's not an unfamiliar story to folks that have been around RG for a while. This is another view of how we might implement that using, in this case, it's envisioned using kind of a project server with SharePoint, particularly to do the repository work. So SharePoint does a nice job of document repository. It makes it easy to link to and share with other throughout the organization. One of the issues with tools such as Clarity or Oracle and even SAP is that it's all well and good if you've got a full-up license, but if you don't have a license, it makes it hard to share those documents across the organization. And most organizations have enterprise SharePoint because they do, in fact, use that as their intranet, and then it makes it a logical place to share these documents. So this is kind of a schematic of how we think of portfolio management fitting in with other technologies, including SharePoint, how you might leverage an enterprise architecture and organizational change management, how you might leverage other services to get the full benefits of a portfolio management process. Shift gears a little bit and talk about where we are today, and then I have been a little bit out of touch, so I apologize for folks. And if there's folks on the line who I don't talk about here, please let me know about it. That's part of the purpose of this presentation. But at DLA, Igor or Bill are doing great work around investment management. Hello? Okay. Igor and Bill are doing great work around investment management. The challenge, and I think Igor would agree, the challenge there is to take it to that next step now. That is, we are doing a great job of tracking, but can DLA start to do a better job of making sure that what they invest in is, in fact, the right priorities? So within the confines of RG, that's our next goal from a consulting standpoint, is help them use portfolio management, investment management to best align resources to the organization. And like many federal organizations, they have spent money along organizational lines as opposed to looking at it from an enterprise view. At Customs and Border Protection, Ariane has led an activity there where the ACE program has gotten the highest rated business case. I think it's the highest rated, certainly top 3 rated business cases across all of the Department of Homeland Security, and that's dozens and dozens of business cases. So tremendous skill and ability to pull all that data together. That's working at the program level. The next step there is how can we start to influence how DHS does portfolio management. They compete on every 3-year basis. They compete an activity that goes to a small business that is to help them administer the OMB 300s as opposed to using that information to guide the agency. And so we want to be in that space that's up above that. We've made presentations, done training, and gotten Honda aircraft started down the portfolio management path. I think once they get into full production, we'll probably come back to that a little bit more. And that's Robert and Brian McClendon really been really leading that effort down there. I know we're doing others. We have done and probably continue to do basic business case analysis of alternatives. It's just about every site where we are. So I know that exists out there, and that's reflected in the 45 people that have shown a high degree of expertise. Again, what we really want to do is leverage that and move from, we're tracking it, they're doing all the right things, to are they investing this in the most effective manner? One of the I didn't put it on a chart, but the term that's often used is efficient frontier. So mathematically, there's an optimal alignment of an organization's resources, which is usually measured in dollars, but could also be people and facilities and any kind of input. And an optimal use of those resources that creates what's called an efficient frontier. That's a, if you will, mathematically derived curve that shows how well you are allocating resources to your priorities. And those priorities are determined organization by organization. So, and they might change year to year. So some years an organization might really be trying to, from a strategy standpoint, grow market share. So that's going to yield a wholly different set of investments than an organization that's trying to cut costs. So it's very situational depending on the organization, but it's all the same basic data, and it is very much the data that comes out of what can best be described in the federal side, at least, as the OMB 300 business case. Sales support activities, this is one of the areas where I did think, particularly over the past year, we need to really ramp up our commitment towards, and so in talking to Chris, this is probably going to be my main focus area in addition to driving new intellectual property is to help our business development teams integrate portfolio management into some of the other services. We do have some legs to stand on. This picture on the right is the Gartner survey, comes out annually. It's an overview of the PPM service providers. We fill out the survey, and we're mentioned in the article and as a leader in those kinds of services. So we do have marketing to fall back on. We have good case studies. If Kathy is here is listening, then I know that I owe her case studies from some of these organizations. So we need to get those together and get those into the business developers' hands. I think for civil agencies, the holy grail is moving from program to portfolio management, and really the shifting of just because I have the money allocated to this program and I approved it once doesn't mean that it's 2 or 3 years later that it's still the right priority and the right thing to be putting my money into. If we take a look, and we do pull all the FedBizOps announcements for portfolio management, there are many, dozens and dozens of activities that are looking for particularly, I'll just say OMB 300 kinds of support. They are almost always very competitive and good to small businesses. So we haven't And we're very choosy about which one of those we bid on for those very reasons. We do bid on a few that are strategic now and again. That's not the focus area. We do keep an eye on it, but quite frankly, like all business development, if we're responding to Fed biz option, we tend to be a little bit late in going after things.
Hey, Keith, I have a question that came through.
Sure.
Is it possible for us to get a copy of the Gartner survey to distribute to clients?
Yes. Let me see. What's the best way to do that? Let me think about the best way to do that, and I will. And maybe we can talk offline, Lindsay, and maybe I put it through Kathy. So yes, absolutely, and let me think about how best to do it.
Okay, thanks.
And I'll do that with all these reports. Thanks. So if I go on to the other ongoing internal programs, very much beginning to partner with Agile. So when Jim Yu talks about the SAFE model for Agile, the top end of that model is very much a portfolio management set of theories and methodologies. So we want to partner to promote how RG can promote Agile, particularly a SAFE methodology across the enterprise. So SAFE is all about making Agile work across the enterprise, scaling it up to the enterprise level, not just to a few small teams. And pretty soon you start talking about programs and portfolio in the SAFE model. So we have a role that we can help Jim there. Then we want to bring that to places like DLA and CBP. Talking to Diane about then if those are the kinds of services we want to be offering, then we want to use PI as a launching pad to start to talk about them and train on those ideas. And then in the more less defined category of potentials, Standish continues to want to do some sort of teaming with us. There's organizations like, APQC out there that are very strong in benchmarking. That's an interesting area around portfolio management. And in addition to Project Server, Portfolio Server, we really ought to be looking at another tool partner. I think Chris talked about we were going down a path with CourseWorks. They were acquired and have shifted their direction. So we're looking at a couple other tool partners because while we don't want to be just about technology, the model of the firm remains people, processes, and technology. And certainly what we've seen is if you have your hands on the data, then you really have your hands on the mission of the organization. So data gets to be very important, and that's almost always housed in some kind of tool. If I was going to counsel folks on, and so part of our plan is how to grow that talent. So this is a matrix that we're using to think about how we want to grow talent, move people from a 6, 7, 8 to a 9, 10, from a 3, 4 to a 5, 6 in the self-assessment survey. So this is kind of our guide for how we want to do that, keying in on how we make decisions, understanding what the real goals of portfolio management are. It is very much around governance and communication, so strong communication skills are very much required in this area. So this is a guide for how we want to develop competency across the company in this area. So then if I put a timeline to all that, we want to spend the next couple of 3 months working on that methodology. We have a couple of brown bags scheduled, and we're looking at third-party tools. Then we start to run into some analyst training, we'll continue the brown bags. We really start to add new IT based on what we see out of those last half of this year, and then start to build that out in 16. Some of the leading candidates are these are placeholders maybe, but things like system dynamics, linear, kind of a linear mathematical approach to portfolio management. Almost everybody uses an analytical hierarchy process right now in establishing priorities. Could that be more of a linear mathematical computation? There's some theory around that we might try to build into our intellectual property. That's our timeline for the next 18 months or so. Pretty much talked about what the core risks are for the practice. We do definitely need to rebuild the business development around a new higher analytical capability. We need to integrate tools and really be building those dashboards. And certainly, portfolio management by itself is a relative. We don't need a lot of people to do a portfolio management engagement, strictly portfolio management engagement for an organization. But if we combine that with enterprise architecture, performance management, organizational change, then you get to a pretty sizable engagement that looks very interesting. Inside, we have to spend some time revamping our intellectual property to that next order of service, and then train our folks and grow that pipeline. So that's, we're going to work it down. Intellectual property, get our people trained, build the pipeline, and so that's how we see our main risk and what we want to do about it. And really, the last thing on this presentation was I like to leave a reading list behind now. So this is the reading list as it stands for portfolio management. It's kind of a broad cross section. So optimizing corporate portfolio management. There's a lot of good methodology in that. Thinking fast and slow. So one of the tenets of portfolio management is that left to their own devices, people really make some irrational decisions, and that's certainly true about how we allocate money. So despite all the MBAs that are running out there in corporate America, we can make some pretty lousy decisions sometimes, and often that's because it's not data-driven. So and there's a body of knowledge coming out of Kahneman, who won a Nobel Prize for his work, to say that one of the ways to fight irrational decision making is through data, and that's very much what portfolio management is about, is bringing data to decision making. And then some of the more popular, like Blink and enterprise architecture, those apply. If you haven't read sort of basic PFM, hardcore PFM, boring stuff, then certainly the PMI and the IIBA references on the subject are certainly applicable. The GAO ITIM is actually fairly a readable document and has lots of good practices in it. And for folks in government, the OMBA 11 very much talks about how to allocate resources to programs and explain why they should be funded. So that's my reading list. And Lindsay, that's, I think, the end of my presentation for today. So any final questions? Or
I haven't seen anything else come through. We've got a shy group today, but I'm going to unmute all the lines. And so, wow, okay, sorry guys. Everyone's unmuted, so mute yourself if you're not going to ask a question. Total wireless. Don't pay for more than you need. Only at Walmart. Okay, I took back the control. You're all muted again, so use the email or questions in WebEx.
This is Keith Kerr. You can reach me on the Active Directory, Keith.Kerr, Kerr. I'm out at DLA almost 100% of the time, so my cell phone is best to get hold of me versus the.
I did have a question come through via email. Do you have your first brown bag scheduled yet?
I do. It's in the master schedule. I don't have access to that right this second. I think it's in July. Okay. And just I will continue to send out invitations for not only State of the Practices, but brown bags associated with these for all the practice areas going forward as well. So My intent with the July one, I'm not sure I've told Igor this yet, but is to showcase the what we're doing at DLA. So that'll be the topic.
Okay, well, I don't have any other questions that have come in. So, Keith, thanks so much. Thanks for everyone on the call. And this is, being recorded and will be posted. And once it is posted, if you all can go and take the survey as well, and for any other practice presentations you've participated in, we'd appreciate it.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye.